You start with the presumption that there's a baseline of suffering in life, and that can be exaggerated as a consequence of human failing, as a consequence of malevolence and betrayal and self-betrayal and deceit and all those things that we do to each other and ourselves that we know that aren't good. That amplifies the suffering. That's sort of the baseline against which you have to work. And it's contemplation of that often that makes people hopeless and depressed and anxious and overwhelmed and all of that, and they have the reasons. But you need something to put up against that. And what you put up against that is meaning. Meaning is actually the instinct that helps you guide yourself through that catastrophe. And most of that meaning is to be found in the adoption of responsibility. So if you think, for example, if you think about the people that you admire, well, you think about when you have a clear conscience first, because that's a good thing to aim at, which is something different than happiness, right?
A clear conscience is different than happiness.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
That's
you're not
better.
Like guilting yourself. You're not feeling bad about yourself.
That's right. You feel that you've justified your existence, right? And so you're not waking up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat thinking about all the terrible things that you've involved yourself in.
What you said to someone that you shouldn't have said, or how you acted, or lied,
or what opportunity you lost, or the things that you've let go that you should have capitalized on, and all of that. And so, if you think about the times when you're at peace with yourself with regards to how you're conducting yourself in the world, it's almost always conditions under which you've adopted responsibility, right? At least the most guilt I think that you can experience, perhaps, is the sure knowledge that you're not even taking care of yourself, so that you're leaving that responsibility to other people, because that's pretty pathetic. And unless you're psychopathic and and you're living a parasitical life, and that characterizes a very small minority of people, and an even smaller minority think that's justifiable. But most of the time you're in guilt and shame because not only are you not taking care of yourself, let's say, so someone else has to, but you're not living up to your full potential. And so there's an existential weight that goes along with that. So
you suffer even more when you don't take care of yourself, or take the best actions, or do the work that you know you can do, and you rely on someone else to support you financially, emotionally, physically, whatever, home, whatever it may be.
Yeah, well, because you're not only not being what you could be, you're interfering with someone else being what they could be, right? So you're not only a void, you're a drain.
Right.
Jesus, that's a catastrophe.
But we usually don't even know it when we're in that situation, because we're in a depressed state, or
we don't want to see it. You wake up at 3 a.m. and and then you think of the people that you admire yourself, or perhaps you can at least live with yourself when you're taking responsibility, at least for yourself. And so that settles your conscience. But then if you look at the people that you spontaneously admire, and so the act of spontaneously admiring someone is the manifestation of the instinct for meaning, right? And this is partly why people are so enamored of sports figures, because the sports figures are playing out the drama of attaining the goal, of attaining a certain kind of, let's say, psychological and physical perfection in pursuit of the goal. That's the drama. And to spontaneously admire that is to have that instinct for meaning latch onto something that can be used as a model. And then that model should be transcribed into something that's applicable in life. And you really like to see, in an athletic performance, you really like to see someone who's extremely disciplined and in shape do something physically remarkable, and to stretch themselves even beyond their previous exploits, because you really like to see a brilliant move in an athletic match. But you also like to see that person ensconced in a broader moral framework, so that not only are they trying to win and disciplining themselves in pursuit of that victory, and then stretching themselves so they're continually getting better, but they're doing it in a way that helps develop their whole team, and that's good for the sport in general, and that reflects well on the broader culture.
They're a great leader in their team, they're positive, they're good sportsmen against the competitors, they're not negative towards the other people, they're lifting them up too. Like the ultimate human.
That's right, so that they can work for their own improvement in a way that simultaneously works for the improvement of their team and for the sport, and then to the degree that spills over into the broader culture, so much the better. So that's all being dramatized in an athletic event. And it's not philosophical, it's concrete, right? It's dramatized in the world, and that's what the games represent. And so, and it's partly because, in some sense, life is a game.
It is.
It is. in that you're always, the analogy is that in life, like in sports, you're setting forth an aim and then arranging your perceptions and your actions in pursuit of that aim. And that you also generally do it while cooperating and competing with other people.
Right.
So that's also the game-like element as well. All of that's dramatized in athletics.
Yeah.
That's like philosophy for people who aren't philosophical. And I'm not being smart about that.
Yeah.
You know? It's like it really is philosophy for people who aren't being philosophical, because it's played out, you know. And you can see it too. You can see the spontaneous appreciation for the human spirit manifest itself when you see people rise to their feet spontaneously in a sports arena when they see someone do something particularly remarkable. See an athlete who's extremely trained stretch themselves beyond what you'd think is a normative human limit, and everyone celebrates that, like, spontaneously. So it's quite something to behold.
And so take me back to responsibility and meaning. When we're watching sports or someone do this act, what does this do for us in terms of responsibility and meaning?
Well, it helps us figure out what we can imitate.
It gives us a model.
Right? Yes, it's a model.
Here's a model of something that I respect.
Well, even what philosophy is, or even theology for that matter, is an abstract model. Like, it's laid out in words. Now, the problem often is it becomes so abstract that people don't know how to bring it back down to embodiment.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereas something like the drama of a sports event is sort of midway between philosophy and action, right? It's not entirely abstracted because it's not only coded in words. It's acted out.
It's visual. You can see an example of what just happened, and you can try to reverse engineer how they did that.
Well, yes, exactly. Well, at least the fact that you admire the person means that you might start to try to act like them. Now, it's not easy, and maybe that would mean that you start to discipline yourself with regards to a particular sport. But it might also be that you start to mimic or are at least affected in some way by their sportsman-like behavior, right? Which is the ground of a certain kind of ethic. Because if you can play well with others, which is sort of the hallmark of a good sport, then that actually means that you're a reasonably sophisticated and civilized person. It's really important to learn to play well with others. There isn't, that's the ground of ethics.
And if you can do it there in that setting, then hopefully you could translate it into life setting.
Well, right, that's exactly right.
That's what the goal.
That's what you hope for.
Right.
Yeah, that's the goal of this. So if the goal of the game is to put the ball into the net, then the goal of having games is to produce people who can take proper aim no matter where they are, right? That's exactly what we're trying to do with athletics. So I've been talking to my audiences a lot about that, and there's more to it too, because if the background of life is there's an ineradicable component of suffering, and that's complicated by, let's say, malevolence and the proclivity of people to betray themselves and others, which complicates it and makes it worse. Then if you don't have a noble aim, and if that isn't imbuing your life with sustainable meaning, then you fall prey to all the catastrophe, the pain and the anxiety and the anger that suffering generates, and that makes you bitter.
Because what I'm hearing you say is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, we must have an aim in our life no matter what stage of life we're in. And if we don't have some type of aim, even if for a few months of an aim of going somewhere, a direction, the suffering's gonna be even more suffering.
Pointless.
Because we're already gonna face the greatest challenges in life.
That's right. You're stuck with it.
We're already struggling.
That's right. There's no way out of that.
Adversity is coming no matter what.
That's right.
If we have big goals or small little goal or whatever it may be, but it's going to be less suffering if we have an aim.
Yeah, well, and not only that, it's worse than that even, because the suffering is
There's
pain.
zero meaning.
Well, the suffering is pain, and the suffering is anxiety and uncertainty, and the suffering is hopelessness. But the consequence of all that is that you get bitter. And when you get bitter, you get mean and you get cruel, and you start to hurt yourself and other people. So it's not only that if you don't have a goal, you suffer. It's that if you don't have a goal, you suffer, and then you get cruel and bitter and resentful, and then you start to actively try to make the world a worse place. And so because you can't suffer pointlessly without becoming bitter, and you can't become bitter without becoming cruel. So you need an aim. The question, of course, is what you should aim.
Better aim.
Yeah, better aim, that's for sure. So then the question is, what should your aim be? And we have a program. It's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today. I have this website called selfauthoring.com, and that program helps people write about their life. And so there's a past authoring program. To establish your aim, you have to know where you are. It's like you're trying to orient yourself on a map. You can't orient yourself on a map unless you know where you are. You also have to know where you're going, right? So those are the two relevant things. The past authoring program helps people write about their lives. So it's a guided autobiography. We ask people to break their life up into 6 epochs, 6 sections, and then to write about the emotionally important events in those epochs, and to detail out why the positive things happened and why more of that could conceivably happen in the future, and to detail out why the negative things happened and to try to understand why, with an aim to not replicating them in the future. Because the purpose of memory isn't to remember the past. The purpose of memory is so that you figure out what went wrong when something went wrong, so you don't duplicate it in the future. So that's the purpose of memory. And the past authoring program can help people catch up. And you know you have to catch up if you have memories that are older than about 1.5 years that still cause you emotional pain when you think about them, or if you dwell on them, they come spontaneously back to mind. It means that there's part of your life that you haven't mapped out properly, and it still has emotional valence that's gripping you.
You're still holding on to that story.
Or it's still holding on to you.
Interesting.
Right.
You haven't let it go.
Yeah, well, you haven't been able to navigate your way through it. There's a pitfall there that you fell in, and you don't know how to avoid similar pitfalls in the future, and that's why your brain won't let it go. Because it's saying, that's what the anxiety systems do. It's like, this happened to you, it wasn't good. This happened to you, it wasn't good. This happened to you, it wasn't good. Fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. That will never go away unless you fix it.
How do you fix it?
Well, you have to figure out why it happened, right? That's the first thing, is like, how was it that situation arose to pull you down? And that's not simple. That's why we have the writing program, because it's complicated to think it through. But if you face it and you meditate on it, let's say, and you do this voluntarily, there's a pretty high probability that you'll be able to decrease the probability that will be repeated in the future.